Hi, Mandalyn. So for the discussion this week, I also chose option one, cognitive distortions. And for the cognitive distortions that were evident in Helen's behaviors and how the therapist responded to them, I just my initial reaction in watching the video before, because at one point the therapist gives Helen the paper and they start talking through those distortions, but before that, I thought, yes, the mind reading, especially, she's assuming that her husband is going to be resentful towards her for having to watch the kids if it turns out that this training or this class that she's going to take is dumb. So I thought the mind reading as well. I also thought a lot of the catastrophizing, right? Like she doesn't, you said like she doesn't see that things are great, and especially with the class, it's like it seems more or less like she's in this rut because she has her master's, she's done all this studying and has all this education and knowledge, but she hasn't done anything with it yet. So it seems more or less like there's a little bit of discomfort in making that step to do it, right? So she's seeing this class as something that's going to be a little bit more uncomfortable with her for her. It's what it felt like to me, and assuming that it's going to be dumb, and she's not going to learn anything from it. But then she also wants it because she feels like it'll be a stepping stone for her to start utilizing the information and the knowledge. It'll help. What is the word that she, I don't know, use, like ignite that fire. I don't even know I don't remember. But so with the catastrophizing and the mind reading, those are the two that I thought. And then also the emotional response comes into it. Like you said, she was having an emotional reaction of her mind reading and assuming that her husband would be resentful towards it. And it's like this feeling of tunnel vision, like you said. Like I completely agree with that. And the therapist responded. I liked how she handed she gave Helen the list and allowed Helen to go through and look at which ones that she thought were reflective in her thinking patterns, or just thought patterns or distortions. And she was able to choose, and the therapist, as you said, had either kind of validated them or further explained them so that Helen was able to understand them herself and know which ones were and weren't applicable to her. Yeah. So, and then for number two, which are ones that you have seen in your work with your students and their teachers, and what consequences do these have? You were talking a lot about teaching reading and phonics and coding, and having kids struggling, or the students were struggling and comparing themselves to other students and becoming perfectionism, and how or becoming perfectionists, and how sometimes they take those thoughts of being stupid and they believe them, and then it turns into a belief that they continue to believe, and then it just is almost like a domino effect, to where if it's I'm stupid or dumb in this one area, then that means, or I'm struggling in one area, that means I'm stupid or dumb. And if I'm stupid or dumb here, then I'm stupid or dumb in every aspect or in every part of school, not just reading. It's going to apply to a math. It's going to apply to science, all the things. I see that a lot too. And then when that happens, right, they do shut down. They shut down. They don't take risks. They don't try. And then that's where they don't grow. So those are some of the precaution, or the risks that come along with that. I think in my in my experience with working in behavior, I see a lot of the mind reading happening, especially with students who I worked with. The kids that I work with are tier 3, And so they, before I even have worked with them, they've already kind of gone through tier one and tier two supports. And so they've already have that label. And kids they're already noticed for being the bad kid or the troublemaker and so once I'm there, it's like they just already start. I had one girl last year who would every like 3 minutes, am I being bad? Am I being bad? Like, am I making bad choices? Am I making good choices? She was always asked, and she was doing the right thing. Like it would work together, but it was always she was always mind reading and always trying to assume that everyone thought the worst of her, and it was really challenging. It was really challenging to say that, and oftentimes I would just flip that back on her. I would ask her, well, what do you think? Do you think that you're making good choices? Do you think you're making, and she would know, but there was still that sense, that instant thought that I am this, I need to ask, instead of taking the time to reflect on what she's done and whether or not it was whether or not she thought she was or wasn't. So saw that a lot with her. And then with other kids, you know, you see a lot of the all or nothing thinking. If, like you were talking about, if I can't do it here, then I can't do it anywhere. Especially, I think Anais and I both talked about this, and I think behavior, especially with behavior, as it's like a form of communication, right? And so and I think oftentimes, you know, behavior isn't necessarily a result of academics, but students who struggle behaviorally a lot of the times also struggle academically, because they don't have time. I think you said in your video, they've got so much other things going on up here that they're not able to absorb what's happening academically. And it's not at the forefront. It's not necessarily important. They've got other things that are taking that place. So there's no areas of gray. It's just like black or white, and it's all or nothing. I am always bad, or I am always going to fail, or I'm really good, so I see a lot of that with kids. And then with teachers, you talked about, oh, the one other thing I wanted to, like, you said something about with your boys, the students, you know, boys, their sadness turns, sorry, my computer shut just a second. The sadness turns in, you know, that stereotype of boys or whatever, boys aren't allowed to be sad, that sadness turns into anger. I see that in the opposite with girls too, right? Girls aren't supposed to be angry. They're not supposed to cause a fuss, so they turn their anger into sadness. I even actually just had a conversation with my mom about this a week ago, and how I learned that from my mom, and my mom does that. And so I think that's something else we see a lot with kids. And you said that, and it was just like a light bulb went off for me. With teachers, you said the musts and shoulds, the mind reading, the all or nothing. And that's really sad to hear that those stakeholders, and that you're like, you were I agree. Like, there's so much pressure that's put on teachers, and you must do this, and you should do this, you have to do this. And it can become really toxic, and it's really frustrating. And I'm sorry to hear that your admin did that with your posting the data and allowing other people to see. That's confidentiality. That's unethical, and that's really crappy. Yeah, that couldn't have felt good. But I agree. There's so much pressure, but with the teachers, the musts and shoulds, the all or nothing, the mind reading, there's a lot of that. One thing I see a whole lot, personalization, you know, just taking everything personally, especially with behavior, from students. And I think there have been times where I've even done that myself, and not taking myself out of the situation and realizing that this isn't about me. It's just about the behavior and what is happening, and how do we address it, and how do we fix this, or how do we work through it. I also see a lot of catastrophizing with teachers. And then the one thing I talked about was the magnification, minimization. Especially last year, a lot of things, the negative things were highlighted, and you know, everyone's struggling, and that was really hard and really frustrating. And not a lot of positive things were talked about until maybe like the end of the year. But what does that gonna do? It wasn't very helpful, you know, at the very end of the year, last day of school, before summer break, teachers are in a staff meeting talking about the positive things. It's like, I felt like that needed to happen mid-year, or every I don't know, every time, every staff meeting. What went right, what went well, what was something that you want, I don't know, want to celebrate. And then last question is, how would you deal with a student with in using the cognitive approach with a student that's failing? I talked a lot about, you said establishing a relationship and creating a good atmosphere. I think that those things are, as a teacher, right, we kind of already have that relationship, but as the counselor, we may not. So that's probably absolutely the first thing that needs to be done. And then I agree, getting to the root of the problem and try to solve that problem. You know, figuring out their beliefs, those maladaptive beliefs that they have and assumptions, and then working through ways on challenging them. And then in working with tools, giving them tools and techniques to kind of be able to problem solve, either independently or with another adult or with their teacher. And then with a student who is anxious or depressed, I said a lot of the same things. Working with homework, thought recording, behavioral activation, problem solving, to deal with those schemas that are kind of embedded within them. I especially thought, you know, the thought recording with these guys, because I don't think that, I don't know what class it was or where it was, but we learned about that stinking thinking and how you can just get caught up in the negative, and it just kind of perseverates and you keep going and keep going. So using something like thought recording and homework around that and creating a schedule around that would be helpful to just bring awareness to the problem, because when you bring awareness, then it's easy to remember it, and it's easy to catch it when you're doing it. I just realized my video is so long, but great video. I enjoyed it, and have a great Sunday.